Welcome to the Washdown podcast. And on this episode, we sit down with Jared Altic. He is a police chaplain. He's worked full-time in the church for 30 years, been married since 1996, has 5 kids. And as a chaplain, he focuses on health and wellness of patrol officers and also responds to unattended deaths such as homicides and suicides. He also has a podcast, the Chaplain podcast, which you can find on Buzzsprout, and he's on Instagram and all that. We'll leave links in the description. We had a great conversation. It was really fun talking with him, so check him out on all of his social. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Remember to like and subscribe and all that stuff. So here you go, the Washdown podcast with special guest Jared Altic of the Chaplain podcast. Didn't hit the record button. It'd be nice if you would figure out how to use the record button.
Oh, I can hit record. Just the pause is the problem. Because you hover over it, even though it says stop, the little pause thing comes up in the corner. I'm like, oh, okay, so just pause it. Yeah. Oh, shit, that stopped it. Oh, well.
Yeah. We had an issue. We were shooting an episode the other day, and we needed to pause. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got it. And just stopped the whole recording. So what it does in the computer, that's its own recording now. Yeah. So then we have another recording. Yeah.
So how much editing do you guys do? Is you just pretty much put it up raw?
Pretty much put it up raw. Okay. I've had to edit.
That's very popular now. It hurts my brain to put up a raw file. I edit everything. But I can't say that that's the norm anymore nowadays. Everybody, I mean, it's kind of the Joe Rogan influence. Just put up 3 hours of raw material, and it's surprising how many people have an appetite for that. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Well, that long-form conversation is, without the editing and all of that stuff, that's what people want to see. Yeah. I think because it's unfiltered, you get people's real thoughts and real feelings. And I think especially in this day and age of how everything can be so edited with social media, and you're only getting this angle or that angle or whatever. Yeah. I think
the authenticity is appealing. And it's difficult to edit video at the same level you can edit audio only. Yes. And so putting up a raw video is very, like I said, surprisingly palatable to people.
Yeah. So, we've had a couple of times where we've been in the middle of conversation and some things have been said, identifiers of one sort or another that have required for me to go back and cut some pieces out and smash stuff back together, and it is never a pleasant process.
No. You want 2 cameras at least, because if you plan to edit something, all you have to do is cut to like a close-up of somebody, and it hides your cut. You can cut out 5 minutes, but you don't know it because it went from a wide shot to a narrow shot, and that's the trick. But running 2 cameras, I mean, that's twice as much data storage. That's a lot of work. But if you ever want to, that's the way to do it. Yeah. Add a second camera.
Go get you some lessons.
Yeah. Well, and that's
you're a terrible editor.
I don't. That's the reason I don't do video. Because I don't want to tackle it.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
We'll see. In the idea or theory that we've been kind of going with for a long time, and what we eventually want to get to is like a 3 or 4 camera system. Yeah. So that way you've got the big overall.
You have a wide shot and a close on each person.
Yeah. And then because we normally have our producer / guy who hits the stop button, who's not here right now. He sits behind the camera over there. So having a camera for him whenever he's talking, instead of it just being a disembodied voice on the video.
He's your Jamie.
Yeah, he's my Jamie. Yeah. Except he doesn't look anything up. And
just Google it. Google it. It's not that hard.
Talks forever.
Yeah. Long-winded
Man,
questions.
that's like a 20-minute question, man. Come on.
Yeah. Well,
it's no fun to make fun of when he's not here.
No, it's not. We'll have to be.
Where did the name of the podcast come from? That's a fantastic name.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, before I answer that, let's introduce you.
Okay.
Right. So, Jared Altic?
Yes, Jared Altic. Yes.
Thanks for coming on, and you've got your own podcast, the Chaplain podcast. Yes. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get back to how we got the name.
Well, my name is Jared Altic, and I'm a chaplain with the police department, and the podcast is an extension of that. Really, my whole life is a Russian nesting doll, and I'm a full-time pastor at a church. And so that's been my job, been at the same church for 23 years, and which is unusually long for a pastor. And in the last 10 years, I've gotten increasingly involved with chaplaincy. Finally, about 6 years ago, dove in, got in with both feet. And the chaplaincy is well supported by the leadership of my church. I'm able to be very involved. It's a volunteer thing, so it's not a paid gig, but I work it like it's a part-time job. And then nested inside of that chaplaincy is the podcast, because frankly, most cops are just not going to come talk to a chaplain. And it can take a long time to get behind the badge. And so the shortcut to that is I can produce a podcast where I bring other cops in to talk about the stress of the job and all kinds of things, career and family life and whatever. And these cops can listen to me have this conversation and can gain something from it without having to engage me directly. And so the podcast is a subset of the chaplaincy. The chaplaincy is a subset of my ministry in the church, and it's the ministry in the church that pays the bills. So that's my primary job. Yeah.
Awesome. And that is
Definitely works.
Yeah, and that's not too far off of why we started this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing of the people that we can get to come and talk about mental health and leadership stuff and all that stuff. We can disseminate it to a wider audience, and people that don't feel comfortable coming and sharing their stories or whatever, or they may be struggling with something, they can see that they're not alone, that other people have gone through what they are going through. So,
excuse me.
And that's why we started the podcast.
Yeah.
And the name of it is, we're both in the fire service. It's basically after you're done with a fire, you're going to wet down or wash down everything to make sure there are no embers left over and no hidden fire. And that's how we come up with it.
Excellent. Man, it's even better than I thought it was. Yeah, I saw that, and I hate it because I've got lots of people that I have helped get started in podcasting. I when COVID hit, I just jumped in. I'm like, I'm going to learn how to do this. This is going to be we're only going to be locked down for 2 weeks. So I'm gonna learn everything I can, everything I can about podcasting.
Banned again on YouTube. It's like quadruple banned at this point. Maybe 8 times. I don't know.
We're exclusively on Spotify now.
We're gonna push the limit. But I've really dove deep in all the technical aspects of the cameras and everything with YouTube, everything with podcasting, all the audio equipment. And so I've been a resource for other people. But they all want to name their podcast Talk About Stuff Podcast with Joe or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there are already 1,000 podcasts that sound like that.
Yeah.
And so you guys' podcast, Washdown, I mean, wow, that is fantastic. It's surely the only one out there with a name like that. I hope there's no others that are even close. But that's a great, unique name, and that's hard to find.
Yeah. Yeah, I found a couple of other first responder-esque podcasts that kind of have something along those lines, but you would be surprised. I thought there would be more. And whenever we were looking at setting this and starting it, that's one of the things I did was do a kind of a deep dive looking for other podcasts that might be similar.
Yeah.
And part of that was I was going to reach out to them and pick their brain and say, hey, how do you do this? And all of that stuff. Couldn't find them. There were none whenever we started this. And now there's maybe 4 or 5. Yeah.
I am pretty unique in my area. I'm surely the only police chaplain podcast in the world, which also makes me the biggest police chaplain podcast in the world.
Well, I didn't know we were sitting here with a celebrity.
That's right.
A trailblazer.
Should have brought my autograph book. Damn
it. But yeah, it's good to have a unique name. It's good to have a unique niche. Too many people try to be too broad. And they're like, I want to talk to the whole world about everything. It's like, no. Narrow it down and be specific. The more specific you can make your niche, and the more specific you can make your avatar, the person that you're aiming for. If you guys are looking for that, firefighter that's, picture how old he is and what his situation in life he is, what situation in life he is in, and then talk to him directly. Yeah. That's going to be far more effective than trying to talk to everybody all at once.
Yeah. And the podcast that you see that do that whole let's talk to everybody, the shotgun approach, those are people that are already famous.
Yes. Celebrities can do that.
Yeah. Joe Rogan can do that.
Yeah. No, but yeah.
I can't do that. I'm not going to get a physicist on here and we're going to talk about, aliens or whatever.
No.
That's just not going to happen.
The hell we could. Let's do that. That'd be awesome. I've watched Ancient Aliens like 1,000 times. I'm ready.
Practically an expert.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, I made a paper degree. I mean, that counts, right?
it's drawn in crayon.
That's right. I use magic markers.
Oh my goodness. So fill us in a little bit on what does it entail being a police chaplain?
Okay. So this is going to open the fire hose. How long do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got plenty of time on that computer.
As much time as there is room on the hard drive.
Are you sure? Because last time we said that.
I deleted a bunch of stuff, and I deleted some programs that were taking up too much space.
And deleted that internet browser history. Okay.
Well, so before you get started.
Wrong computer.
Wrong computer. This is strictly dedicated to the podcast.
Okay.
So, but we were sitting here and we were just doing an episode just ourselves. Well, I had a whole bunch of episodes still on there. And the reason I was keeping them was because I had a new editing software program that a buddy of mine had recommended. So I was going to start working with that. And I wanted some old stuff that I could mess with without, messing up the new stuff potentially. Well, we're sitting here and we're going and we're probably 45 minutes, an hour in.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. And I turn and happen to look and there's no red icon for record. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? So we go over there and look and it recorded about 15 minutes and then said out of space.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's brutal.
It's all right. That episode sucked anyway.
Yeah, it was not awesome.
Not at all like this. This is way better. Yeah, no, this
We
is
just fumbling through.
So chaplaincy.
Yes.
Okay. I can break it down. I feel like there's two important halves of chaplaincy, two different hats that a chaplain can wear. Both of those get eclipsed by a third role that is not very important. That's the one that I think a lot of chaplains that do exist, chaplains that are attached to fire departments, police departments, whatever, they jump in and get attached to that third aspect, which is the ceremonial aspect, and which is the public one, which is the natural magnet for people. People want to go. They want to go stand up on the stage with the mayor and the fire chief and give the invocation, the opening prayer, or the closing prayer. It's a very important feeling. Feel like you're a VIP. And that ceremonial function is relevant and important. I think it's good that when we're doing a memorial service that we invoke God and that kind of thing. That's important. But you can't get lost in that. And I fear that maybe some chaplains do. They aspire to be up there in front of a crowd of thousands, and they get a little too focused on that. And it's not like anyone's listening to your prayer. I'm sorry. I've been up on those stages, and a chaplain will spend weeks preparing just the right prayer, and they have this one line that they think is going to be really poignant, and they drop that out there for everyone to hear. No one's paying attention. And, people are spaced out or looking on their phone. I mean, the three people in the room that actually listened to what you said in your prayer already agree with you. There's no value in it. And so chaplains get trapped in this ceremonial function where they're there to solemnify an event, invoke the name of God, represent the faith community. And it's not that that's bad or wrong. I believe in prayer. I'm a religious man myself. But that ceremonial function is so unimportant, I don't even really consider it, the two main halves of what chaplains do.
Right.
The two that I think good chaplains focus on are not the ceremonial stuff. The ceremonial stuff, you can bring up any clergy member to come, any priest, rabbi, pastor, imam can come up and give a prayer. The two aspects that I'm concerned about are the short-term and the long-term pastoral care of people who are in crisis. And so you have in the short-term care, I function very much like a spiritual paramedic, where a paramedic's not your doctor, but he gets you from the incident to the doctor and provides you that short-term care that we're going to stop the bleeding and transport you and get you from point A to point B. That's what a chaplain can do for members of the community, whether it's victims of some terrible accident or natural disaster or whatever it may be, or maybe it's the family members of a victim of crime. Whether they're standing there with, they got the blankets around them, or whether they have they're standing at the yellow tape, the chaplain can come and provide short-term pastoral care. And I'm not your pastor, I'm not your counselor, I'm not your support network, but I can get you from this hour right now where your loved one is laying dead on the sidewalk over there. I can get you from that event to your help, whether it is, like I said, maybe you got a network of friends, maybe you have a counselor, maybe you have a priest, whatever it is. I can get you through tonight. And for a few hours, I'm going to be here to provide comfort. I can answer questions. A lot of times I function as a liaison where cops and firefighters do not speak normal human language. And so they're talking in 10 codes and all this other stuff, and the battalion chief and whoever's, it's all this gibberish, and they don't understand what's happening to their house or to their loved one or whatever. The chaplain can come over there and interpret and explain, hey, this is not disrespect that your loved one is still laying dead on the sidewalk. The CSI techs and the detectives have to do all their work, and it's out of respect for your loved one that they are still there after 2 hours, because they are going to find every scrap of DNA or whatever else they're looking for in order to make sure that your loved one is, that we have an answer at the end of this. We can't reverse what's happened, but we can bring you justice. And so this is going to be a slow process. And so the chaplain is there, and I typically at a scene, I'll stay up until the bodies are moved. When the transportation company comes and puts them in a body bag, puts them on a gurney, and have them leave the house for the last time ever, I usually am right there with them, and I'm there when they're bagged up. I'm there when they're escorted out. I walk ahead of them just like I would at a funeral, where I would walk ahead of the casket to the graveside. I walk ahead of the gurney out to the back of the transportation van as they go on to the coroner or the funeral home or wherever they happen to be going in that situation. So that's short-term care. Those family members, I'm never going to see them again. All right. It's very unlikely in a major city that I'm going to run into them casually. It's very unlikely that I already know them. Odds are that's my only interaction with them. And in that interaction, I have called their priest or their pastor or whatever they have. A lot of people don't have anything now, so I'm maybe reaching out to a counselor or a doctor or just a family member, but I'm handing them off. And that's the end of my short-term care. And so I don't know how you guys work in the fire service. I don't know if you're also paramedics or if that's a separate job.
Well, he's a paramedic.
Okay. And so odds of you seeing someone after you leave them at the emergency department, not real high, I presume.
Unless they're a regular.
Right. Well, we get those too. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's the short-term aspect. And a lot of chaplains are very good at that because they come from the same place I come from. They come from the church. They have been trained in crisis counseling. They deal with some of the regulars. They are prepared to deal with mental health crises and other, disasters and horrible events. And if somebody is engaged in the community and connected to the community, they actually can plug right in and help in a much better way than that ceremonial chaplain I was referencing earlier, who is kind of like behind glass, like break glass in case of emergency. Those chaplains are so disengaged that if you do call them out to an F5 tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake, nobody knows who they are. And I talk to police officers all the time who are like, yeah, I hear that we have a chaplain, but I've never met him. That's a red flag. Okay. That chaplain is disengaged. They're just there for ceremonies. They're not engaged in that short-term care of the citizens. And if they were, then the firefighters and the police officers would see them on scene. They would know that, hey, I don't have to take care of that screaming family member that's laying on the ground, like, literally throwing a fit. The chaplain can do it. In fact, I joke with my officers, the worst comes to worst, just take the chaplain by the back of the belt and the back of the collar and throw him over the yellow tape, like into the mosh pit, right? And that's what we're there for. And frankly, those cops have other jobs they need to do. And managing somebody who's having a breakdown, leave that to a trained counselor, not a 25-year-old cop.
Yeah.
Right.
Who may or may not have 4 hours of some kind of CIT training.
Yeah. They slept through CIT training, and
he's been to CIT training.
Oh yes, I have. I did 40 hours of it just this year, actually, and I was the only one awake, taking notes copiously, and everyone else was kind of like,
I'm gonna sit next to him next time. Hey, what's 5?
Yeah, I can help you out. And so, in fact, some of that short-term work is what really instigated me getting into chaplaincy. Was the thought of, because I have a lot of cops in my church, and the thought of some of these 25 or 30-year-old cops having to do a death notification kind of broke my heart. They have so many other things. I'm not a police officer. I've never been a police officer. I can't imagine the work and the stress that they do. But a death notification? I've been doing funerals for 30 years. I can do that. And so I got trained up on it, and my initial interest in being a police chaplain was to go do the death notifications. I did one just the other night where I will, if I'm on a death notification with a detective or a public information officer or whatever, I will step in and say, okay, I'll take the lead. Give me the contact, give me the name, the deceased, let me have all the information. I'll follow the correct procedure so you never, ever, ever make a wrong notification, because sure as enough, if there's Bob Jr., there's going to be a Bob Sr. and a Bob the Third, and you better know who it is that actually died and who it is you're talking to, because if it can be misunderstood, it will be.
Yeah.
So I'm prepared to make that notification, and at my age, at my stage of life, with my experience and training, frankly, that doesn't bother me that much. I can do this, and I can take on that stress and deal with it, and make that death notification. Tell that loved one that, sorry, your child was killed in a car wreck last night. I can do that where I don't need those officers to take all the stress that they normally carry and then do this also. So yeah.
How long did it take you to be able to go to detectives and say, hey, let me take the lead?
Well,
for them to give it to you.
Specifically with that, I was asking the very first time. Some of them didn't know me very well at the beginning, and they're like, are you sure? And I think they kind of thought, well, here, this is rough stuff. We'll let the chaplain fall on his face. But I started out already having 20-plus years of ministry experience. I've done this in my other job. And so it really wasn't that big of a bridge to cross for me.
No, it's just the trust issue with cops and their procedures, and I get.
Well, they don't trust anybody, so
yeah. Exactly. So now you have to build that relationship to be able to consistently take over. Like, hey, I got this, and I agree with what you're saying, that you're definitely prepared for it. You know how to handle it, and you know how to deal with the stress that comes with the notification. Yeah. Even on the mental health side.
Right.
Damn words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but building that trust to let them, just have them hand it over to you, and they go with you.
Like I said, I don't know if the first time or two that they handed it over to me, if it was trust. It may not have been trust. It may have been like, ooh, hey, watch this. Dinner and the show. This will be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got your camera ready?
Exactly. But there's nothing like competency to win over a first responder. And so if you can do your stuff, if you know what you're talking about and you can handle things professionally, that opens some doors. And so, and that actually leads into the other half that I think is really critical for a chaplain. It's where my focus is the long-term care. So lots of chaplains are able to be plugged into the community, help citizens in a moment of crisis. That's a special skill. A lot of them have it. It's much more rare to find a chaplain who's willing to do the long-term commitment with the first responders themselves. It's like you have jail chaplains, prison chaplains. Almost always, they're dealing with the inmates. Mm-hmm. You almost never have a jail chaplain that specifically targets the jailers, the sheriff's deputies, the corrections officers. They almost never. It's almost always focused on the person in prison.
Yeah.
But frankly, those officers are in prison with them.
Yeah.
And they need just as much encouragement and support for all the stuff they go through, and that's a long-term relationship. And so I was trained in chaplaincy by mostly military people. They were either military chaplains or they were prior military before they went into first responder work. And so their mentality is a chaplain jumps out of the airplane with the airborne division and is on the ground out there in the field with them. A chaplain is on the ship with the sailors. They eat the same food. They're on the same schedule. That is, a shared experience. And so I just approached it like, well, of course that's what a police chaplain should do, which turns out is actually kind of rare. You got those folks like Matt Damiancic and some others who are willing to like go to roll calls and be on ride-alongs and be involved and to know what a police officer goes through. But Matt was a former police officer. He was a former SWAT guy, so he came in with instant credibility. Imagine being the thoroughly civilian chaplain,
I'm sure it was like just easy as pie.
Oh my goodness. Police officers will make themselves unlovable because they'll push you away to see if you can be pushed away. And so their MO almost always, 8 out of 10 cops, is like, well, I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to turn on the swearing to max. Every word's going to be an F word, and I'm going to just absolutely push you away to see if you can be pushed away. Mm-hmm. And then when you are pushed away, because I was so vulgar and so offensive and so apathetic that you finally went away, that just proved my thesis that you're someone who didn't want to be here. So I just stuck it out. And I kept showing up, and I never asked for anything. I wasn't selling anything. Even my podcast, it's not monetized. I go out of my way to not sell these officers anything because they're already so cynical, so skeptical, especially of outsiders, that I just determined, well, I'm just going to keep showing up. And after, just a short period of a year or 2 or 3 or 4, that you will eventually believe me that I don't want anything from you. I'm just here to help.
Yeah.
And so that long-term relationship is very difficult to build. Almost no police chaplain has a paid position with the department. It does exist. There are a few places where like the head chaplain is a sworn officer that's paid, but they almost always administrate a group of volunteer chaplains. Yeah. And so there's not a lot of money to be had in this. If you want to be a chaplain, go be a hospital chaplain. Hospital chaplains go through a ton of education and they get paid to do their work. Police chaplains almost never get paid. Oh. And so you're going to be a volunteer. You're going to be an outsider. You will always and forever be an outsider. Even someone like Matt Domyancic, who was formerly a cop, he wasn't a cop there.
Yeah.
And so he, and every year that goes by, you're a year further removed from whatever it is they're doing right now. Those policies, those techniques, that political situation, whatever it is, you're an outsider, and you're always going to be an outsider. But if you can earn some trust, if you can show that you're not wanting anything, I'm not here so I can rub elbows with the mayor or the police chief. I'm here because I care about 25-year-old patrol cops working midnights, dosing the caffeine and dealing with all the cynicism. I care about those cops, and eventually they'll start to believe you. It's very slow. Getting behind the badge, say 18 months to earn trust. It's 2 or 3 years, easy. Yeah. And some you will never completely trust you.
Well, that's in the first responder world, there is always a pushing and testing, and I think some of that has to do with the personality types that come into this work, and then some of it has to do with the fact that this job can be life and death.
Yes.
So there has to be, we want to keep testing each other to make sure, okay, are you going to be there whenever it gets really bad? Mm-hmm. Can I really count on you, to do your job? And maybe if I do something stupid to save my life.
Yeah. Yeah. As a first responder, you are deliberately soaking in things that most people avoid. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that, speak of critical incidents, most people don't experience 3 or 4 critical incidents in their entire life. A first responder might see a dead body every week. Okay. A first responder might see a mutilated hand or face or other body part multiple times a year. And so over the course of their career, they're going to deliberately rack up hundreds of events that are traumatizing to one degree or another, depending on your resiliency and what you're doing and how healthy you are. But they're deliberately racking these up where most people deliberately avoid them. That alienates you. That alienates you from your family. That alienates you from your old friends. It makes you this weird alien species that people don't know what to do with you, which, as a minister, I can appreciate. You'd be surprised. Most ministers are not invited on float trips. A lot of neighborhood barbecues, stuff like that, where people are going to be joking and cussing and drinking. Mm-hmm. They don't invite the preacher.
I can't imagine why.
You just got to show them how cool you are during the sermon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Drop an F-bomb every once in a while.
My five kids are so impressed with my efforts to look cool. Yes, that makes a big.
Man, I like potato salad. Yeah. I like ribs. I like beer. I mean, come on, it's cool.
But and a lot of people are surprised if they do get to know whether it's a preacher at a church or more specifically to this conversation, a chaplain. They're surprised to find out the chaplain might be a pretty normal person and somebody they can relate to, and they can talk about the Chiefs and the weather, and it's not every conversation is gonna be a Jesus conversation.
Yeah.
And they kind of assume that maybe these weird alien creatures who are ministers are just unapproachable. And when the first responder finds out that, hey, you're kind of like me. You're unapproachable in some way. Some of the stuff you do and the stuff you see, the stuff you deliberately chose to do as a vocation that alienates you from your family, man, that's a dynamic that I have. And there's nothing like, that's the beginning of friendship, is for one person to look at the other one and say, hey, I thought I was the only one. You too. This is how friendships start. And so so there's a lot there. I think the Venn diagram between a chaplain, especially an engaged, what I call and what Matt Domyancic calls a patrol chaplain, that kind of engaged chaplain has a lot in common with a first responder. And if they can be a regular at the roll call at the police station or at the firehouse and really engage and know each shift and build rapport, even if it takes years, even if you're not being paid for it, if they can do that hard work, man, you've got an inroad that, the counselors for the department probably don't have. The sometimes even peer support falls down on, because peer support might be made up of officers or firefighters that are a bit removed from the job that you're specifically doing now. And if they're disengaged and if they're basically a stranger to you, yeah, they should know your job, but they don't know you. And when you're in a crisis, there's nothing better than having someone who knows you, who already knows your name, who already knows who you are. That's a helpful person when you're really neck deep in the bad stuff. That's a helpful person.
So how do you balance between all the roll calls and the ride-alongs and all that stuff, and then plus family life and your actual job?
Yeah. So I'm fortunate that in my job, I can make my own hours. And so if I'm on call and I get called out to a homicide like I was the other night, then I can adjust. If it interferes with something with work, I can move my hours. I can just do my day job later. I can work an extra hour or two tomorrow or something, and I can adjust my schedule pretty easily like that. But as far as balancing things like mental health wise and that sort of thing, I have to take my own medicine. Right. And so I tell these cops, I go, you got to go talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be a counselor. It doesn't have to be the chaplain, but you need to go talk to somebody who's culturally competent and somebody who actually cares about you. Okay. And so find somebody who's able to take this, somebody who can listen to you, that sort of thing. You need to go talk. So I've got a chaplain, Matt in California, and another chaplain in Indiana that when I leave a call, I call them, and just as quick as I fill out my own report for the police department, I also, feel like I have to debrief. And when I debrief with them, then I'm done with the call. Mm-hmm. And so I need to talk about, even if there's nothing bad that's happened. I see a lot of dead bodies, but I don't dream about them. I've been doing funerals for 30 years. I'm just not phased that much. And when it's bad, like if it's a suicide by shotgun or something like that, I see one or two of those, I don't go out of my way to look at the third or the fourth or the 10th. Yeah. And so I kind of guard myself in that aspect, and I'm not deeply bothered by it, but it's not going to be the one, it's going to be the 100th that'll get to you. Yeah. And so even if I'm not bothered, even if I don't feel like it was that big a deal, even if, I get back in my car and turn on a podcast and I'm just like, in another headspace going home, I still need to go call one of those guys and decompress and get all out. I need to story tell my trauma, even if I don't feel traumatized by it. So okay, here's what I saw, and yeah, it was kind of bad. Like blood was running down the sidewalk and whatever, and yeah, the guys were joking about that, but that's what I saw, and I'm gonna spell it out and I'll say it out loud, and that is a great psychological release to talk about it out loud. People frown on gallows humor, and police officers, especially on a scene, have to be careful because news crews show up and they'll spot somebody laughing and they'll put that footage on the evening news. Look at these cops standing over this dead body laughing.
Yeah.
Not laughing.
It's not just the media. It's everybody with a cell phone too.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you did say something that I was going to ask you about, so we might as well hit it now.
Sure.
The cultural competency. How long did it take you to achieve that?
In a
Or
way,
are you still working on it, I hope?
Yes, yeah. In a way, my whole life, I've been surrounded. Even though I wasn't in a law enforcement family or a military family, I've been surrounded by those people, and I'm a natural history nerd, and so I came into this already knowing the difference between a captain and a major or a colonel. That was already something I was up to speed on, and then all of the intricacies of the department that I serve. Man, there's no manual for that. There's nothing, especially directed at chaplains, nothing to help us. And so it is very much, you've got to be an autodidact, teach yourself, what's going on, ask a lot of dumb questions, and someone can scoff at you. How do you not know? But of course I don't know. I'm an outsider.
Yeah.
And you just have to bring yourself up to speed, and you have to care enough to make that investment. And unfortunately, like I said, there are ceremonial chaplains who they have no idea who the people are or what rank they are or what job they have, and they're not at a place in their life where they care about it. And shame on them. They either need to not be in that role and be walking around with a jacket that says chaplain on the back, or they need to start investing and learning how to be culturally competent. And so, yeah, I have read every cop book and novel and anything I can get my hands on, every podcast, including some that are very poorly made. I just am determined to.
So you've watched this one? Is that what you're saying?
No, this is nice compared to some of the stuff I've seen. Yeah,
that's one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good job, Chris.
I try and get like 5 in before I make fun of the podcast.
Yeah.
Or at least Jeremy.
Yeah. He let me know earlier today that he's been paying guests behind my back.
Oh, yeah. Well, I missed out on that.
Yeah.
I didn't know about you. You didn't talk to me. You talked to Jeremy.
No, I want to go back to something that we were talking about a second ago, and we will do this a lot of go back and forth.
That's fine.
And back and forth. But whenever you were talking about the whole self-care thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that gets lost with a lot of counselors and chaplains that deal with the first responder sphere population because there is this push and this idea, especially amongst us, of we always have to be there and work, and that's the thing is we always have to be available because I'm always a fireman or I'm always a cop, and we put those same expectations, it seems like, on our counselors and therapists and chaplains of you got to be available all the time, and that walking that line of being available, but also taking care of yourself and doing the things that are going to recharge you is so important. And I think a lot of counselors, therapists, chaplains, and stuff, they kind of tend to burn out.
Yeah, our self-care is crappy.
Yeah.
We are really good at preaching it. We're not good at living it.
Yeah.
And so
sounds familiar.
Yeah, we can tell everybody else what they need to do to be healthy, but we don't do it ourselves.
Oh,
and,
I've definitely seen, people talk about how they need to stop smoking to a COPD patient and yet continue to chew, or diabetics need to lose weight, and
you can tell how I'm doing.
Don't look at me.
I'm just I wouldn't saying anybody specific. I don't know why you got all offended.
It's more
all of a
the
sudden.
smoking while you're on your oxygen. I have a problem with.
But this episode is brought to you by Skull. No, we do a terrible job of that. We don't practice what we preach. There's a lot of problems. You can tell, for me, if you watch me, if you knew me over the decades, you can tell how I'm doing mental health wise by what set of clothes I'm in this year. And so I don't smoke, I don't drink, married to my high school sweetheart, I don't drive fast cars, but you can spot my mental health status from 100 yards away. If I'm putting on a lot of weight or if I'm losing a lot of weight, you can watch it go up and down as the years go by, and that's we all have our deadly, unhealthy habits, and it's just as bad as any of the others.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that. And we are terrible at, it's the do as I say, not as I do thing.
Yep.
Well, that's to being the helper and the carer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I care about you, so somebody's got to take the hit. I'm going to take the hit.
Yeah. We got a bit of a martyr's complex.
Yeah.
We think, I'll sacrifice myself for the sake of others.
Yeah.
We
all want to be bull from Backdraft. You go, we go.
Yeah. Yeah. We all.
I didn't know how I was going to work that in today, but I knew I was going to because I sent him the picture the other day. I forget what we were talking about.
Is that part of the Washdown drinking game? Is that you take a shot every time you hear Backdraft mentioned?
No, we don't do any. There's no drinking games that I'm aware of associated with this since I'm a recovering alcoholic. So
I haven't had a beer in like 5 months.
Good.
It's weird.
I haven't had a Bud Light in like 47 years, and so I'm boycotting. And so
You just started early.
yes, I anticipated. I anticipated where they were going, and so yep. So
Oh, that's I like it.
I'll still drink it. I don't really. It's not going to affect me. I'm like whatever, man.
has it though? Has it?
No. I'm still good. I'm still weird. I mean,
just terrible, terrible, terrible. I guess what is it? Miller Lite's got this like same controversy. I think it's Miller.
So's Coors.
Yeah, about they had an ad that ran like several weeks before about women being brewers or something, and then it resurfaced because now people are offended by it.
Yeah.
I don't. That's the thing. Every company in the country is going to have stuff that offends somebody.
Oh yeah.
I just don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
If I like your product, I'm going to use it. If I don't, I'm not.
Well,
that's kind of where I'm at with it.
It's unfortunate that we are developing a culture where the highest, most valued currency is being offended.
Yeah,
and that is a culture that's spiraling around the toilet bowl.
Yep.
That is not an indicator of health. Okay,
no,
that's an indicator of dysfunction. And so whoever is most offended, whoever has been most victimized, that kind of lack of resilience, lack of self-sufficiency, very unhealthy place to be mentally. And no, you don't want your first responders going around like, oh, I'm a bigger victim than that. No, you gotta be able to set aside your offense and really all your other feelings, whatever, and take care of the task at hand. Otherwise, you're not very useful. And that's part of that trust thing you talk about with firefighters and cops, where they're like, do I still trust you? And if you're having mental health problems, are you going to be reliable or not? Mm-hmm. Which is really harsh. Really, it can be unfair. But you're in a situation where there's a collapsing building or bullets are flying, and I cannot wait for you to feel okay. We have to do this now, and I must depend on you. I must trust that you're, one step behind me, and that you'll always be there.
Yeah,
that's a bargain that doesn't have room for these luxuries of, oh, I'm more offended than you are. There's not room for it in that world.
Yeah, there's not, and I think that's one of the things that is going to continue to be an uphill battle for the whole mental health. I don't want to call it reform or whatever, but the idea of going and getting help and that being okay.
Yeah.
That's the uphill battle for it, is because that has been so ingrained for so long. Yeah. And the misunderstanding of just because you go see a therapist or just because you're struggling with this thing, that doesn't mean you're not capable of doing the job.
Right.
It just means you need some help to get past this situation. And if you're being proactive about things, then all it is a checkup or getting past this one incident and not letting all of this stuff pass or stack up to the point where, you're not dependable to go into that building because you're going to break down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those things of you got to do the prep work. You're not going to go to a powerlifting meet if you've never lifted a weight. You're not going to jump in the pool and try and swim against Michael Phelps if you haven't been training your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
got a question. So, I admit that I am relatively ignorant of firefighting and all the ins and outs and details. I presume if you're responding to a structure fire, that you're all arriving in the same vehicles. There's a group of you in the fire truck, a group of you in each fire truck. Is there ever a situation where, like, a firefighter's having trouble, wanting to charge right in, and it's a situation where he should? Okay, we're not questioning tactics or something like that, but he needs to charge right in, but he drags his feet. Is that cops are all arriving in different vehicles.
Yeah.
And one guy can be driving 80 to get there, the other guy can be driving 20.
Yeah.
And he can hide the fact that he's avoiding the danger or the conflict, or he can be the third officer to show up and not have to fight somebody.
Yeah.
Is that is that a dynamic that can happen in firefighting?
So, yeah, I think there are ways that people can kind of do things like that.
Okay.
Like so most fire departments or fire crews have assigned tasks of what they're going to do whenever they show up. And, if you're on a pumper or engine company, you're going to have somebody that's going to be catching the hydrant. So if you don't really want to go into that burning building, I'm the hydrant guy.
Oh, okay.
All the time.
Not necessarily predetermined?
Well, sometimes it is by where you sit on the rig.
Okay.
So, and
sometimes it's not. I mean, it depends on how you want to run your crew.
Right.
Yeah.
The person, like, you pull up and the fire's on the driver's side, that firefighter on that side might pull the line.
Okay.
And then vice versa if it's on the other side.
Okay.
It just kind of depends on how you want to run your crew and how your crew operates.
Yeah. It's human nature. If there is a way, and if they're that type of person and they want to kind of shirk their responsibility and not really want to do their job, they're going to find a way to do it. So yeah, there are some. But
that goes to that trust issue, because it's not just firefighting culture or police culture that manufactured that artificially. The situation naturally said, okay, there is danger. The only way to attack this is aggressively. Those who aggressively attack it could be hurt.
Yeah.
And so that dynamic was naturally produced.
Yeah.
And it's going to be true no matter what we do to encourage people to seek help with mental health issues. That danger will always exist. The danger is not going away because we change policies or change culture. The danger is still going to be there. And so when someone's having a mental health crisis, they can see it manifest for some people in a reluctance to do the job, a lethargy or an apathy that they're just slower, or they just don't care as much. They're just not as hard charging. Some of that happens with age. That's fine. Yeah. But some of it is actually a symptom of something going wrong.
Yeah.
And if they can hide it by just coincidentally always being the third officer to show up, no one knows. And they may not even be conscious of it. Yeah. They just are, there's just a reluctance in the back of their head, and they haven't identified that as a mental health symptom, that if they went and got help, and if that was destigmatized, if they could just go get help, then they could be back to normal, or they could find a different role, or they could just be healthier.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that's that thing with first responders being great liars to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not really being like our friend Steve Pope, who runs firefighter golf or first responder golf. Like he said, be self-aware. And that's checking in with yourself and being honest of, hey, why am I always the third person there? Or why am I always the hydrant guy? Or why am I always the guy on the outside? Or, why am I always driving, the pumper a little bit slower than maybe I should? Or why am I driving it too fast? Or, that kind of thing. That's where you really have to sit down and you have to have that tough conversation in your head of, okay, what's going on with me? Yeah. And it's time to go get some help. And like you said, the stigma has to be, removed so that it's acceptable to go do that. Yeah. And part of that is just culturally understanding, like I was talking about earlier, of you go get help and then you come back to work and you do your job. Yeah. And you can recover and you can still do the job. Yeah. And there are cases, of course, different levels of trauma for everybody, and everybody handles it differently in that. And we've kind of talked about that on the podcast before, of sometimes somebody just has so much stuff stacked on top of them that they have to be aware enough of their situation that it's time to hang it up.
Yeah.
And that is okay.
And that's always going to be a little hard to determine with mental health
It's
because
individual basis.
even the individual and their caregivers don't know for sure how serious this is. If you break your leg, you can heal and come back to work. If you have your leg amputated, you might not ever come back to work.
Yeah.
Okay? It's possible, but it's, that we all know immediately there's a difference.
Yeah.
With mental health, we're always guessing a little bit. Is this a broken leg? Is this a sprained ankle? Or is this an amputation?
Yeah.
And we're not entirely sure. And so, again, the natural dynamic of it is always going to have a little bit of a problem because some people are going to overreact and think, oh, it's an amputation. I can never trust you again. That's where the stigma comes from.
Yeah.
So that's difficult.
Yeah.
Can I ask another firefighting question?
Sure.
So on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the people that we were talking about before that are a little bit reluctant, kind of dragging their feet. Sometimes mental health stuff comes up at the opposite direction. And they're driving their motorcycle 140 mile an hour, and they're rushing in first with cops. You clear a room by themselves. Cardinal rule: do not clear a room by yourself. But they'll just they're clearing a house. They'll just walk in a room by themselves. It's like okay, you could have been killed. What are you doing? And sometimes somebody who's having a mental health crisis is kind of okay with going out as a martyr.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm willing to do that. So what does that look like in firefighting?
Well, I think there's some of that going on with guys who get in too deep, and then of course, we have the drugs, we have the drinking, we have the fast cars and the motorcycles and all of that. We have all of that same stuff. With ours, as far as like job performance type stuff goes on, it's, maybe getting in a little bit deeper or, doing some stuff that maybe isn't the safest and the best, but
because I always picture you guys working together as such coordinated units. A lot of policing,
it's coordinated chaos.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of the best way to describe it, because you have a lot going on quickly, but it's all at the same time.
Yeah.
But if Jeremy's on a truck and I'm on the pumper, I know what he's doing. He knows what I'm doing, or at least what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I always picture firefighting as analogous to the SWAT team. The SWAT team, they all know what everyone else is doing. But that's not true of most of policing. Most of policing, you might be given an assignment by a sergeant or a detective, but odds are you don't know for sure what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And it's not very coordinated, and there's places where people can take unnecessary risks or can hold back either direction.
Yeah.
But they can do that, and other people may not necessarily know. That'd be hard to do on a SWAT team. SWAT team, everyone would know that you weren't where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And firefighting a little bit more like that.
So it is, but also you got to remember the environment that we're in a lot of times, especially whenever it is a structure fire. You can't see. The only time that obviously you're going to communicate and talk, but it's loud. The radio's going off. People are talking on the radio. You're bumping into things. So it is very easy to, I'm not going to say get separated from people, but to say, okay, well, this pumper company went in the front door and they went left. And then for the next company to come in and go right. And then, so you don't know the interior layout of the house.
Right.
You could end up over here. And then the other company is over here, and you're spraying water this way, and you're pushing everything onto them. And, that does happen, and especially whenever you start talking about having rescues and truck companies who are coming in the back of the house to do searches and stuff. It's a dangerous proposition, and a lot can go wrong.
You don't have full awareness.
You don't have
of
full awareness of where
Okay.
everyone's at and what everybody's doing. Because it's very easy, and I would say it's more common than not, to kind of almost get into a tunnel vision situation of doing whatever your task is and not really thinking about, like, if I'm on the hand line, I'm thinking about, I'm putting the fire out. I'm not thinking about what they're doing searching.
Right.
So, which can lead to problems, especially if they came in the back to do, a search in the back. Did they close that door, or am I pushing everything onto them?
Okay.
Well, yeah, if you leave that door open, now you create a different flow path for the fire and the smoke, and then the heat's going to go different places. The fire, instead of the fire going where we want it to, now we've created this other one where it's easier for it to go, and it's all about pressure. And so it's It's organized chaos.
It
Right,
is.
right.
And if everybody does their assigned task, then more often than not, we can have a good outcome.
Okay.
But if people start deviating and getting that cowboy syndrome and stuff, then we start sending people to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I've been on those fires.
How much, I don't even know what your terminology is, but how much do you debrief or go through what happened after the fact? Is that common in firefighting? Is that rare in firefighting?
So for some departments, it's very common. For
Okay.
others, it's not so much.
Okay.
Sometimes it is the companies will just sit around the kitchen table and talk about it. And,
kind of
maybe
informally.
Yeah, informally,
Okay.
the battalion chief. So the only time we have, at least most departments, I'll say, the only time there's a big debrief where you get brass coming in and all of that stuff is whenever something goes really bad or it's a really big fire. Or
Okay.
you get multiple people hurt or
Yeah,
somebody
fatalities
dies.
and-
Yeah.
right, okay.
Then they'll come in and they'll do an after action review.
But
And
aren't people covering their butt at that point?
sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on your leadership.
It's
If
not
you've
really,
got
those aren't really punitive in nature.
Okay.
It's more of a, hey, this is kind of what we found. This is what we did well. This is where we can get better. That kind of thing. Because, I mean, none of us
Yeah.
want any loss of life or any injuries at any fire or any event we go to.
right.
So it's more how can we do this more effectively?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's
So the main statements on the fire department are, and our goals fall in this order: life safety, property conservation, and incident stability.
Mhm.
Right. So we want to make sure that we get everybody out alive, if possible. Then we want to save as much property as we can while we stabilize the incident and mitigate the risk.
okay.
And that's what we're trying to do on every scene.
Okay. So maybe here's a gap in my
Or
knowledge.
life safety, incident stabilization, then property
There you
conservation.
go.
You have
I was
these-
going to let it go,
Yeah,
but I'm like,
yeah.
You
Don't
have
let it
these
go.
principles. You have these principles,
Yeah.
but to what degree are you guys on autopilot, and to what degree are the commanders on scene actually directing and making decisions?
that's call
That's-
dependent.
yeah.
There's a lot of variables to it.
Because when leadership has an opportunity to fail, where there's truly I can go left or right, and I have to make a decision, making the decision in a timely fashion, and then making the right decision is pretty important.
Yeah.
And leaders who were great when they were following orders, I mean, that's how they got promoted, was because they were fantastic at doing their job.
Yeah.
But then now they're the one making the decision, and they're maybe having a mental health crisis that's unresolved. They're battling addiction. They're doing whatever. Now their decision making could be impaired, and that could be exposed in a debrief. You know, it's like, boy, why did the battalion chief or whoever whoever the captain of the crew was, I don't know what your terminology is again, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but why did he not do this? If he had done this, we would have had this fire done in no time. And instead, it went this direction. He just made a bad decision. Is that just he made a bad decision, or is that a symptom of something? And I don't know to what degree firefighting culture zeroes in on that.
That one is kind of tough because things are every fire is different.
Right.
And again, we don't know the layout of that house and we can't see, so that you're making educated guesses.
Okay.
when
So
you
the
pull
variables could hide if there's bad decision making.
or if it's something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And usually it's I went, pull up at the house, the door's on the left, so we went left because the fire was upstairs and the stairs were supposed to be there. But they remodeled the house and they're back and there's a closet with a kitchen table in front of it.
Right.
That's where the stairs are.
Right.
Well, things like that. It's something that major but minor at the same time
Yeah.
can change the outcome of a fire. Or a window was broken before we got there that we didn't know about, which changed the flow path of the fire. So when we opened the front door, introduced all that oxygen as we went in, it lit.
Right.
So
right.
there's so many things to it.
Well, and
You can do 100 decisions the right way.
not to mention,
So things going poorly are that's not necessarily indicative that the person
Not
on scene made a wrong
necessarily.
decision.
no. Well,
Okay.
and like he's talking about, then you also have to think about, construction materials, what's in the house, what's burning, and
Yeah.
then also realize that 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a single company show up initially.
Right.
And then the next company might be 30 seconds out, depending on where you are, or a minute,
Okay.
and how fast fire spreads and doubles.
Yeah.
And all that. I mean, all of that stuff has to be taken into account.
Right.
And then, depending on where your battalion chief, who is quote unquote going to run the fire, how far out are they? Well, if it's on the far end of their district or even in an adjoining district,
You guys are already well into it before he gets
5-7 minutes, they're already set up and doing what needs to be done.
Now, is this an abandoned house? So how'd the fire start? Which is kind of, you got to think about before you get there. You know, is it squatters, like homeless people, and they're trying to stay warm? Was it kids having fun? Is it an occupied house?
Right.
What time of the day is it?
Would change how you attack it.
No, but not really, because I just assume that every house is occupied.
Okay.
That way, I don't make a mistake like that, because I don't want to leave somebody in a house that's savable.
Right.
But, you know, an abandoned house that has the gas and power shut off doesn't just spontaneously ignite.
Right.
So somebody had to start that fire. But now, in what context? And you want to get a quick attack on it. That way, you can save somebody if you're able.
Well,
but,
and
there's houses that there's nothing to save.
Right.
Till we pull up.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm not trying to be critical of the decision making
No, I'm not
of
taking it that
the
No, you're
crew
asking-
leaderships or the
yeah.
battalion chiefs, but I know with cops, what you have are these guys that were hard charging, they made important arrests, they were super proactive and aggressive to solve crimes, and then they get promoted on up and they find themselves in administrative roles that is not their skill set.
Yeah.
They were rewarded by being removed from the job that they were really good at.
Yeah.
And so what you find with cops, the average suicide for a cop is not the 25-year-old that's, elbows deep in a dead body. The average suicide is in his 40s, and he's already been a cop for 15 plus years, and it's the accumulation of changing jobs and going through a divorce or two and dealing with addiction and all the stress from years back, all the accumulated traumas.
Yeah.
That's when he puts a gun in his mouth.
Yeah.
And so I am looking, even though I focus on patrol officers, we have 3 patrol divisions in the department that I serve, and I split my time between those 3. And I get to where I've got, 200 and some officers, and I get to where I try to know every one of them by name. And I don't know 100% of them, but most of them I know pretty familiar basis. But I'm looking at their supervisors and their commanders, and I'm looking for indications there too, because even though I'm on the preventative end, I'm trying to give young police officers the tools they need to be healthier when they're 45 years old, because they're still 20 years away from that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the 45-year-olds, and I'm wondering, how much have you already been through? And are you showing me symptoms? Are you broadcasting to me that you're this close to ending it all, but none of us are aware because you're the superstar and you've got such a great reputation? Are there indicators in your mood or your decision making that we should have been paying attention to? And we're all going to sit around at your funeral and say, man, we should have seen it coming.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. I know it will, but I don't want it to happen. And so I'm always looking at those guys, because most of them are about my age, and I'm thinking, okay, these guys are studs. They've got such a great reputation, but that doesn't mean they're okay.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking and trying to interpret, what's going on. And I don't know. I mean, I can't read their minds.
Yeah.
But like I said, we'll all say, oh, I should have known. I should have seen it coming if something bad happens. And so I'm always kind of got my radar antenna up, trying to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things with first responders. If we are pretty good at masking it at work. So you may be going through divorce at home, you may be going through addiction issue and all that stuff, but you still show up to work.
Yeah.
The very last thing that will suffer is the job.
Right.
Everything else fall at crap.
Yeah.
But the job, you'll still get there and perform. It's whenever it starts affecting the job that it's at that point.
Yeah, it's probably already catastrophically bad in the other areas. Yeah. Men are good at compartmentalizing. There's a book years ago that said men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. Have you heard that before?
I have not.
Men are like waffles. If you pour syrup on a waffle, the syrup is in some squares. It is not in other squares. And it's clearly defined.
Yeah.
That makes us really good in an emergency, okay? Because that means we can ignore all the other squares and just focus on the one that's on fire.
Yep.
Right. So men are great for that. That makes us good in combat, makes us good in emergencies. We can compartmentalize. Our brains are naturally wired. Most men compartmentalize very well, which is a problem when you're looking for mental health things, because that means they can hide all those mental health problems. They can be going through a divorce, they can be addicted to who knows what, and knocking their kids around, but at work they're fantastic because we compartmentalize. Women stereotypically are like spaghetti. You look at a plate of spaghetti noodles, you do not know for sure which noodle is connected to another noodle. And anybody who's married knows this. it's like why does your mom calling have anything to do with your friend's child soccer team? What does that have to do? We don't understand, because we're compartmentalized. Where women are much better at making connections relationally, and so everything's connected and everything's flowing. And in some ways, it should be easier to provide mental health to female first responders, because they might be more willing to ask for it, and it'll be more obvious. They're going to wear it on their sleeve a little more readily that, hey, stuff at home is bothering me. That spaghetti noodle's connected to this other stuff I'm doing. That, in theory, should be easier with our female first responders. In reality, it's not, because first responders are such male-dominated cultures that a lot of times our females come in and immediately adopt a masculine attitude.
They try to assimilate because it's a survival technique.
Yes, absolutely. And so they're going to be the loudest mouth cussing rough guy in the room, even though they're 115-pound female, but they're going to assume that role, which also means they're going to hide all the things that we need to be looking at as coworkers and leaders and chaplains. We should be looking for clues, and they're hiding it just like the guys do. Yep. So
yeah, I think it's that personality trait. It's the idea of the job and the culture and all of that stuff, and it does need to change. It has to to move forward and to get past where we are. I mean, Matt posts stuff all the time about how many suicides so far this year and all that stuff, and it's like it's depressing, quite honestly, of how many that already. We're not 6 months in, and I think the last thing that I saw, 33 cops, 8 firefighters, like 2 or 3 dispatchers, and all this, and it's like, okay, this is a problem, and it's been a problem for a long time. I read a paper from 2017 which compiled data from like the previous 3 or 4 years. It was like 343 or 350 firefighters committed suicide that were confirmed. And they actually thought or extrapolated that it was probably twice that number due to the way that it was reported by people covering it up so that the family could get benefits and all of that stuff. So
and we do a terrible job of tracking people who are separated from service. If they've retired or quit, they're still a firefighter that committed suicide, but they haven't worked for 2 years, so we don't count them. And so So how young can a person become a firefighter in your state?
So it's 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. We were actually talking about that earlier with the guest that we had on earlier, and he started in an Explorer program when he was 14.
Oh, wow.
And actually running calls and doing CPR and doing all this stuff. And it's like, we had that conversation of, how do you safeguard those people? Because they're kids at that age. And their brain's not fully formed.
No.
So the trauma that they are seeing and enduring, what is that doing to them later in life? How is that rewiring their brain?
Right.
And is it making them more resilient or less resilient? Or is it an individual basis?
And like everything in this conversation, the answer is probably it depends.
Yeah.
But
I think if you give them the tools at a young age and they understand it, I think you can make the case for them being more resilient as they get older. But you got to do it the right way, like we said. Everything has to be done the correct way.
Yeah. Well, what is the correct way?
I
mean, because you know how
it depends.
Well, I mean, because we all talk about, you're a chaplain and we're firefighters and, in the mental health arena or whatever. When you start talking about, okay, well, we're going to have mandatory wellness checks or mandatory go see the therapist or mandatory debriefs immediately. Well, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
Or
It could be mandatory take a shower. I ain't doing that. Mandatory
Or-
eat lunch. I ain't doing that.
Right.
It's like, come on.
But you got the people that go the other way, like, all right, make it mandatory. And I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna tell them exactly what they want to hear
Right.
to get the okay check mark,
Yep.
and I'm back out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
And-
the minimum I need to do to check the box?
Yeah.
So the reason I asked about how young, I don't know how many young, like let's say under 25 people you actually work with on a regular basis, but do you feel like they do better, like generationally? Are they better at talking about their feelings or anything like that in firefighting?
Again, it depends.
As a whole, I've seen more people of the younger generation be more open about it
Yes.
and not worried about the stigma or
Yeah.
what the senior people think.
That's what I think I'm seeing.
And I'm like, I think it's great.
And I see
And it's
that.
rubbing off too, from what I've seen
But
so far.
from what I've seen, it's those younger people that are a month in, 2 months in, or a year into their career
right.
who have been in places that are more accepting of that already. What I have also seen on the other side of that is younger people who are in stations that are not accepting of it, that still have that old mentality, and you will see them flip of, go to the suck it up buttercup,
Right.
side of the fence
Right.
per se. And so I think, if the community or the people that they work with are already more leaning towards that way of being more accepting to it, or at least even being open
Right.
to it, or at the least not bad mouthing it,
Right.
and not saying what a crock of crap it is or whatever, then those younger individuals have that ability to be more open and they're more comfortable with it.
Right.
But it's just like anything else, we talked about, we have situations and issues of doing certain jobs, and you come in and it's the new guy's job to do, clean the toilets, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they're sitting there cleaning the toilets, and then you've got the old guy who's been on for 25 or 30 years, and they're like, oh, that sucks, and how long is it going to take them hearing that sucks every day before they adopt that same attitude?
Yeah. Bad attitudes are contagious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like if I had to, grossly overgeneralize, which I've been doing the entire time here, so I might as well keep on going.
I love it.
But I think that the under 25-year-old crowd, which most places in the United States, you can't be a cop until you're 21. Mm-hmm. Some are trying to lower it to 20, but it's pretty common that you can't actually be a uniformed sworn officer until you're 21. And so those early 20s, that age bracket, I feel like I'm seeing a more open attitude toward mental health and every other kind of problem. They're better at taking time off. My generation, well, yeah, you can offer me time off, but I'm not going to take it. I'll come work overtime. Of course I will.
Yeah.
And that generation's like, it's like, well, can I get an extra day off?
Yeah.
And good and bad. There's a work ethic issue there probably, but they are more open. They're more willing to examine themselves. On the negative side, maybe they have a little less resiliency. The old man in me, get off my yard, kind of get off my lawn kind of attitude is maybe they've been coddled a little bit, but the ones who are volunteering to be first responders are typically self-selected, where they're already toward the end, or have a little bit better resiliency. They come from maybe a little bit, not on average, they come from families that are a little bit stronger, resources there. Not always, but sometimes, I think, versus just a random sampling of the public. And so I think I'm seeing, people who could have a good, healthy career in going down the road. Unfortunately, as soon as I generalize and say, the majority of them I feel pretty optimistic about, I'm immediately thinking of some that I everything about them, there's just red flags everywhere, and I worry and I hope that they kind of get their feet under them.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not sure if you should even be
in the
this.
middle here between the two. You have the old school and the new school, and you got to meet in the middle, because there is we need to be open and we need to talk about it. We need to fix the problems and you need to self-reflect.
It might help in some
but
areas.
there's also the suck it up buttercup's not 100% wrong either.
Mm-hmm.
No, because
there's a place for it.
Yeah.
Part of that compartmentalizing we were talking about.
It is.
Yeah.
And you got to pick the right times. Just
Yeah.
like if you're on the scene of a shooting with the police and or a fire with the fire department and you have your command, that's not the time to worry about, well, how are we going to help afterwards? Like, yeah, I'm worried about your mental health, but we got to deal with this first.
Yeah.
So suck it up for now, and then we're going to go deal with it.
Yeah.
Because we have a job to do first.
Well, and
You got to hit that happy medium.
And I think it's one of those things of, you see the new recruits come in, police department, fire department, and, you can say, oh, I see this person is going to be good, this person's going to be good, whatever, and this person, oh, they're terrible, and they're not going to last, and they're not going to last. I think with the staffing issues that are nationwide, I think those are exacerbated.
Yeah.
Because it is
you can't be too picky.
Yeah.
'Cause you need every warm body you can get.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't lower your standard either.
Yeah, but they get lowered. Yeah.
They do,
Yeah.
and I mean,
And there'll be consequences to that.
There are consequences.
Yeah. There will be.
Memphis is a prime example of what happens when you lower the standards.
Yes.
Especially for PD.
Yeah.
Like, not a single officer that was on that scene would have been hired 5 years previously.
No. But as soon as you lower standards, people in first responders, people will die. And it may not be the ones that didn't meet the standards.
Yeah.
It'll almost always be somebody adjacent to them.
Yeah.
And so it'll absolutely cost you. And I'm not opposed to somebody who's very mediocre holding down a spot for a while. I appreciate it. This is not going to be your career. You came in and you helped some for 5 years of your life, and we appreciate your offering. Thank you very much. But the fear is that they would. People are survivors. And so you let somebody in that really shouldn't be a cop or a firefighter to start with, and they don't handle it very well, but they want to survive, and so they will find their way into a niche that might include leadership. Could be some sort of administrative position where you can make decisions and control things, and they can become the king of their own little kingdom, and they can control equipment or property or whatever, and they never should have become a cop in the first place, you know. But
on the flip side, they might be really good in there.
What's that?
On the flip side, they could be really good at the administration role.
Yes.
They could be really good at decision making when they're on the outside, not being faced with that danger and having that dopamine and the adrenaline and all the cortisol and all of that stuff dump or shrink up or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a spot for everybody. You just got to find their strength.
Yeah, I have two different types of cops.
There are those that don't need to be there at
Right.
all. Don't get me wrong. There are some of those. I'm not saying that.
I have two different types of cops that come to me and are, wondering what should they do next. Should they continue in this career or not? And there are some of them, and I never know for sure, but I try to get a read on it. And some of them, they need to go sell insurance, because they never should have gone to the police academy in the first place. They're not cut out for this. There's not a niche that would be appropriate for them. I don't care what it was. They just need to go do something else. But there's others where with police officers, you almost always start out on the road in patrol. And that is not a good fit for every cop. There are some cops who hate that job. Long hours, forced overtime, often working by yourself or maybe one other person. It's just miserable. And it's very dangerous. It's very unpredictable. It's just bad for young families. A lot of people, they don't adjust to it. And for them, I'm not telling them to go sell insurance. I'm like, hey, just hang on. If you can wait 2 or 3 more years, then you can bid into some other specialized unit, and you might love being a cop if you weren't in patrol. If you could
Could
go
be.
do something else,
and that's where I think these career fields need to adapt and change with the times and really take a hard look at leadership as a whole and being able to move people and put people where they will be successful.
Yeah.
Because you do have those people who are going to be superstars at some kind of administrative role.
Right.
But they are garbage EMTs or firefighters or cops. They're just terrible.
Yeah.
But you set them behind an Excel spreadsheet and they're going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've also got the other end of the spectrum of people who are terrible at any type of administration, but they are the best firemen you've ever seen. Right. They can read smoke and read a fire, and they know exactly where to go every time. Or, they are the best technical rescue person, and they can get somebody out of a car like, it's like magic.
But it's often that type of skill set that gets you promoted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
the Peter principle kicks in.
And I'm not against those people being promoted. I'm not not at all. I mean,
Sure.
I think that's part of treating this job like a career, because you do want to advance in your career. You want to make life better for your family. You want to, make more money and all of that stuff. But with that comes the responsibility to learn leadership and also pass down that knowledge. So you find the next technical superstar, or the next pumper captain who is going to train his people up or her people up to be those rock stars that we need.
Yeah.
But it's having the ability to put people in those places. And I don't know, aptitude test.
Yeah. Well, but that depends on how old they are, because every man has a transition he has to go through from where he was the young warrior to being the old sage. And that transition, boy, that can be bumpy. I mean, tell a guy that's 15 years on the SWAT team that, you're getting too old to be kicking down doors. Oh, it's his whole identity.
Yeah.
He really needed to have been preparing, for a promotion or a different job or something years ago.
Yeah.
But he was good at what he was doing. He was the best at what he was doing.
Yeah.
And his whole identity is wrapped up in that. You're telling him he shouldn't have been focused on. That's what he was good at.
Yeah.
And so every guy has to do that transition, and that's really difficult.
Yeah.
And some guys do it gracefully, but others struggle with it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's that, stereotypical professional athlete who's only ever played second base his whole life, and now what's he supposed to do when that ends, right? And so every firefighter, every cop is going to have a similar kind of dynamic where stuff you were good at early in your career is not necessarily what you'll be doing. You'll either have to stop your career or you're going to have to transition. And can you do that well? Are you going to have the emotional reserves to do that? Are you going to have the family support to do that? Are you going to have the mental health to do that?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're so depleted in all of those areas. What should have been a very clean transition becomes a bit of a hot mess.
Yeah.
And that's sad to see. And so
it is, but it's very common, and it's a very, it's not specific to us. Like you talk about athletes, military guys. I got a buddy of mine that spent almost 20 years in special forces, and he's like, he goes, at the end, I was there because of my knowledge. He goes, I couldn't keep up with those 23, 24-year-olds. They would, run circles around me, but I was there because I knew, okay, I see that's an ambush. Yeah. But we're not going there.
But that's the old sage.
Yeah.
You start to be useful not for what you can carry, what you can do, but for what you know and what you can teach.
Yeah.
And if you can transition from the doing role to the giving information role, the teaching role, that if you can find whatever that is in your field and make that transition and anticipate it, be prepared to transition it.
Well, and be allowed.
You'll be better. Yes.
Be allowed
and
to
sometimes
transition.
You're not. Yes. Sometimes there's structures in place that keep you from that.
Yeah. And most police departments, most fire departments, to get into those positions, it's usually some kind of promotional process or test that you have to take. And, you might be great at it, but you're number 2 on the list.
Right,
so,
right. And we're only promoting one this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So sorry, you get to take the test again.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, that's one of those things. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier of we need to modernize, for lack of a better term, and start thinking about putting the right people in the right spots for them to be successful and to make the departments better as a whole.
Yeah. And providing helpers that can help them and guide them, people like chaplains who are not part of the promotion process.
Yeah.
You can be your advocate, but not directly involved in your, discipline or your promotions or whatever. Have you guys, I don't know what your departments are like, but do you guys have fire chaplains? Do you know who your fire chaplains are? Do they know you?
So we have, three?
We have three.
We have three. I know one of them.
Okay.
But not because of him being on, because he was on the job and he's been on the podcast a couple times. Okay. So that's how I know him. But it's not like, I think some departments do a really good job of putting that out for their people. But those are also the departments that do a really good job of taking care of their members' mental health and doing things that are proactive with their physical health, and like they're proactive. We'll just say that. And then I think some departments don't do a very good job of that. They don't let you know what resources that you have, be it whether it's mental health, physical, or chaplains programs. And I think that it's one of those things where it's going to boil down to department specifics of, we have this, we have that. And, the information flow, which we kind of talked about earlier today, there's a top down that needs to come of, hey, you've got all of this stuff, but then a bottom up of, hey, we need this. What do we have that looks like this?
Right.
And some departments do it better than others.
Yeah.
So
just like any Fortune 500 company, some are better at certain things than others, and it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah. So the reason I ask is because my secret ulterior motive to being here today is to recruit you guys to become first responder chaplains someday. Because here's the deal. My day job is I'm clergy. I'm a minister at a church. Okay, I'm a preacher. Those are getting rarer and rarer. Okay, there are fewer churches in the world, now than there were, in the United States than there were 50 years ago. But the number of churches that are closing are being outpaced by the number of ministers that are leaving ministry. You guys talk about all the problems first responders have. People who are in ministry, divorce, alcoholism, suicide, that hits them too. And so a lot of, like, I look back, 25 years ago at the guys I graduated college with, went to a Bible college, we're all going to be ministers or youth ministers or missionaries or whatever. Out of let's say 20, or let's say 24 people that I was close to, I think there's 2 of us that are still in it 20 years later. Everybody else has burned out, whether they just quit and went to sell insurance, or whether it's like that's a really terrible job.
Big on selling insurance.
I'm rough on the insurance salesman. Yeah,
is that what your wife does? Does she sell insurance?
My brother did that for a little while. Yeah.
If you can't do anything else, just go sell insurance.
But some of them have done that. Some of them completely left the faith. Whatever. Some of them, even worse. And so the numbers are not good. But I look across first responders, and I'm like, we need chaplains. Peer support's great. EAP's great. All the other resources are fine. But where are those advocates that can come in and really, there's nothing connected, like I said, to promotions or discipline. I am just here because I care about the health of this 25-year-old firefighter or 25-year-old police officer. Who's doing that? Who's guiding them? Some of these officers don't have biological fathers that were in their lives. Where's the chaplain that can come in and fulfill that role and be a guide to them and help them through a very difficult career and manage to get through it and not only get home each night safe, but to finish their career safely? There's not enough ministers to come in and do it this traditional route where I was in ministry for years and still am, and then that evolved into me volunteering as a police chaplain. There's not enough of me, and I need 10,000 more of me. And so what I have to do is think outside the box, and I can't go to the Baptist preachers and the Catholic priests. There's not enough of them left. I need to go find retired first responders who already have cultural competency. I need them to come in and fulfill that role. And some people object, like, well, I'm not like ordained clergy. That's fine. I already said, I think the ceremonial roles of the chaplains are the least important part of the job already. We need people who maybe you did a little program or got a certification or training in counseling. Maybe you do have some religious training or something like that. Whatever gives you a foundation to be a trusted advisor, a trusted guide. Let's take your cultural competency you already have as a first responder and turn you into a helper, and that might be your second chapter. Every first responder jobs are not jobs you work when you're 75 years old. And so most first responders retire relatively young. They have a lot of health. They have a lot of energy still to give. I need first responders who can, maybe, like I said, get a little bit of certification and training and whatever, and then come in and help. And you're thinking, well, yeah, I'm not going to go back to my department. That's fine. I wouldn't advise that. I don't think a police officer who retires should go back to his own department and be a chaplain. I think it's actually better to go somewhere where people don't know you, and you've got the cultural competency because you were a police officer or firefighter, but you don't have the reputation of, well, we know you, and it's the whole a prophet.
We
in his
were
own
drinking
country.
with you 2
Right.
weeks ago
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
bar. Really,
Yeah.
Clarence?
Yeah.
Come on.
I've got a chaplain friend. He is a retired LAPD officer, and he moved to the Midwest, and then he now is a chaplain at an agency here in our hometown, and man, he's fantastic. And did he ever lay eyes on that agency before he came to be their chaplain? No, but he's got all the respect in the world from the officers because he was at LAPD.
Yep.
And so seeing those guys come in and offer guidance and care and concern. I mean, man, sometimes that's all we need is if we're in a crisis, if we just knew that somebody cared, that might keep us from putting a gun in our mouth.
Yeah. Well, it's that great, I call it, the great lie of I'm the only one who's
Right.
ever gone through this.
Yep.
You know, and I say it with sarcasm because once you've been through it and come out the other side, then you know how stupid it is.
Right. But that's
but
what we all believe.
That's what we all believe. And that's part of removing that stigma of going and normalizing the stuff of, hey, this stuff that we see and the things that we do and the things that, especially police officers with moral injury, the things that, if they have to use their weapon or whatever, that takes a toll. It has to. But they have to know that that's normal and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't get into it to shoot somebody. They got into it to help people.
Yeah.
But shooting somebody is something that might happen during your career. And even if you don't kill them, I mean, just thinking that you caused harm. I mean, I know cops that have shot somebody and 2 minutes later, they're applying the tourniquet and they've got the person's blood all over them because, they're trying to save that person's life.
Yeah.
But you still attained a moral injury by having caused the harm in the first place when that wasn't ever your intention. You never thought you were there to hurt people.
Yeah.
And then you think, man, am I someone who hurts people? And you have this identity crisis, a terrible, terrible thing that goes on. Another first responder would understand that.
Yeah.
And so seeing cops and firefighters go be even cross, disciplines. A retired firefighter could be a chaplain for a police department, and a retired cop could be a chaplain for a fire department. There would be still enough cultural competency to really make an impact.
Yeah.
And if I can recruit a future generation of chaplains to come along, I mean, especially where they're not getting paid, having a pension would help tremendously. We need those people to come in and contribute. And we're recruiting people who are counselors, people who are former first responders, people who are lay ministers, like maybe in their type of church. It's not that they went to seminary, but they just kind of got trained within their own church and they have some ability to help people in crisis. we're recruiting all of those kinds of people to become chaplains and get them. There's chaplain training out there. It's easy to find. Most of it's pretty basic, your standard, critical incident stress management type stuff, but we'll get you through that and get you that training and get you to volunteer, and then just go find a firehouse and know all of those shifts that work at that firehouse, or just go find a police station and just know those patrol officers at that police station. We're not asking you to solve the whole world's problems. Just go find a few dozen first responders and know them by name, care about them, invest in them, be there for them year after year. It'll literally save lives. And that's what I'm trying to do. So if you guys just sign here on the dotted line,
Oh, it was a great sales pitch.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's not a bad idea.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean,
So
we talked about...
where's foul language fall in the whole thing? 'Cause I'm a cusser.
Well,
I work with some Lutheran chaplains that they can both drink and swear you under the table, and so it's impressive.
That's a whole different religion.
But no, there's all kinds, and like I said, there are some that are just as square can be. That'd be me. But there's others, like I said, that are former first responders, former military, and boy, there's nothing you can do to scare them off. And frankly, even some of us who are pretty square, you can't scare us off either. We're determined to love these cops, whether they want to be lovable or not. And so, yeah.
Sounds like cops.
Oh yeah,
Firefighters are better. I mean, let's just be honest here. We're easier to like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny, not funny that you say that, but it's one of those things where, the guy we were talking to earlier today was talking about, he's about to retire and maybe getting a little bit of counseling degree and then doing some of that stuff and, staying connected that way. And then I've talked to several other people within the past few months who are like, yeah, I'm probably going to get, counseling degree. And one guy that we had on the podcast, Mike Delaney, former cop, that's what he's doing right now. He's waiting to get into his master's program for that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think people that have gone through that stuff and then come out the other side see the importance of it, and they also see the shortage and the need. Yeah. My wife is a counselor.
Okay.
And that's her whole practice is first responders and veterans. And it's like, yeah, we need help. We need more people that do this type of work because the demand is only increasing.
Right.
It's like, call volume with the police department and fire department. It's only increasing. It's not getting less. Yeah.
We had a cultural shift that I think hurt us to some degree. It's not that we can't overcome it, but it hurt us. If you go back a few generations, I was talking earlier about the people who volunteer to be first responders are a self-selected group. Mm-hmm. And so you find a lot of folks, especially a few generations back, who came from church-going families with two parents. They were Boy Scouts, and there was just like this track that led to people volunteering for the military and to be first responders. And not that was everybody, but that definitely was a stereotype.
Yeah. And
those who grew up in church, for all the negatives you can say about church culture and the things we've seen in American church culture in the last 200 some years, one of the positives was the people growing up in church heard about life and death and the afterlife on a regular basis. And so this was a conversation they had on a regular basis. I mean, literally worshipped a God that was tortured to death. And there's an understanding, a familiarity with serious topics like that were talked about regularly from the time they were little bitty all the way. I've heard it every week. They talked about dying, they talked about death, they talked about what happens after death, about having hope, all these things related. They were bathed in that all through their childhood. And even if they got into adulthood, stopped going to church, they still had all of that built-in resiliency that others didn't have. Well, now we have young people coming into being first responders that have never been in church because they're now maybe a couple generations removed from going to church. And like I said, not that going to church is the be all and end all, although I personally am in favor of it. But the loss is now you have people that are being thrust into an environment where they're seeing death up close, but they did not have 18 or 21 years of discussing it every week before that. And some people will be fine. It won't matter. They'll be fine. But I think when you're talking about tens of thousands of first responders, millions of first responders, we would see better percentages if they had been raised with that, if they'd had stability, if they had had those conversations, if they'd had that inculcation. We don't have that. We're not going to get it back. We can't snap our fingers and change it. But that is part of the dynamic we're working with now. I counsel with first responders that really have not ever had some of the conversations that when I'm going and teaching first and second graders at my church, I'll sit down and teach them a lesson about dying and things like that. Then I'm like, oh wow, I'm talking to a 35-year-old cop who's never had that conversation. And so that's an interesting dynamic.
Never thought of it that way.
Yeah, and we've sat here and we've kicked around that topic quite a bit of the cultural shift and why is it so hard to get people in the door and why do people seem less resilient now than they did in the past and what's changed and that's one thing.
I think that's another factor.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the church.
Yeah.
We went every Sunday.
Yeah. It had an impact on you, even if you had a negative experience. I don't have any idea what your
I
experience was,
never had a negative experience.
But even if you had one,
except he was a Duke fan.
Oh well, that could hurt anybody.
Rock
Chalk.
Father Bill, Rock Chalk, baby.
Come on, bro.
Father Bill was a Duke fan. We'd sit up there, while the deacon was doing his stuff, and we just talk shit about basketball and how KU was better. KU's better. No, Duke's better. And did you watch the game? And I watched this one. And the Bulls were really good at the time. We were up in Chicago living.
Right.
And so we talk about, we're in Springfield, Illinois, but we talk about the Bulls and baseball and all that. He was great.
But all of that had an influence on you, and I would argue would have, on average, given you and people like you a little bit more resiliency, a little bit. You have somewhere to start with. If you want to talk to somebody about, I went to that call and the passenger's head was missing, and that image has been seared into my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I think about it. You at least have a foundation to begin that conversation that someone who didn't have that religious training as a child may or may not have. And like I said, not that everybody, I've met some non-religious people that are very squared away. And I've met some religious people that are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But on average, I think that helps. And I see it in the counseling that I do.
Yeah, I can see that definitely being a factor.
Yeah.
Just another avenue.
Well,
you know what I mean? I'm not discounting anything you're saying. So I think it's another reason.
Yeah, just on the broader
yeah.
spectrum of society. I mean, you see how our society has shifted just in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, of what was important.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but if you look back,
out.
so, I mean, go back and watch some of the old, like, I'll bring up Key and Peele, you know, a TV show that was on 10 years ago almost now.
They get canceled now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They couldn't do those shows. And they're talking about some of the same topics that are now just being completely blown out of proportion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like,
look at the Chappelle show.
This was an issue then, but everybody was laughing about it. It wasn't really an issue. It shows how kind of dumb it is, but now this is what people are hanging their hat on and they're losing friends over.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee?
No, I'm not a big Seinfeld fan.
Okay.
My dad was talking about this. I watched an episode with him. It was pretty good.
It's remarkably good. He meets up with another comedian. They drive some fancy classic car or whatever.
Yeah, because he can buy anything he wants.
Right. And so, but the conversation in several of those episodes go back to, it's a good thing we're at the back end of our career as comedians, because nowadays nobody finds anything funny. They're all too offended.
Could you imagine Sam Kinison right now?
Wouldn't.
Rodney Dangerfield?
Wouldn't get out.
Richard Pryor.
Yeah. No, they wouldn't.
Eddie Murphy.
They wouldn't get out.
Yeah.
Wouldn't get off the ground because they'd get canceled and everybody would be so outraged. And so that's a cultural shift that affects our first responders.
Mm-hmm.
That affects how they view themselves, how their peers view them. If you're a cop, there are people who, you can be a black cop, but you're a racist. You're part of white supremacy just for wearing the uniform. and that absolutely affects how you feel and how you process trauma and whether you're healthy or not. That shift in our culture is very toxic, and it's absolutely showing up in the health and wellness of our first responders, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our comedians, those poor guys, they're struggling. Yeah.
Who was the guy that used to do the roast with Dean Martin? He, old white guy.
The insult comic.
Yeah. Can't think his
Don
name.
Rickles.
Yes,
Don
Don
Rickles.
Rickles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I could see his face, and I'm like, what's his freaking name? I can't remember all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Imagine him right now.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh, it's still funny when you watch it.
No.
Yeah.
No,
And,
there are
you know,
very few like Dave Chappelle who can still be successful.
He's on that
he's
toe in
big
that
enough that he
line.
can take the hits.
Yeah.
He's too big to cancel, and so that's good
Well,
because they
I
sure
think
tried.
it's the I don't care attitude.
Yeah.
Like whatever, I don't care what you think.
That's good advice. You cannot publicly. You cannot be canceled unless you care.
Yeah.
Okay, if you care, then they have power over you.
I saw a meme on Instagram of this little girl. She's probably 3, 4, something like that, sitting in a car seat, and she's sitting there. She's looking at the camera, and she goes, "You got to stop worrying about what other people think. Have you met other people?" And I'm like, wiser words have never been spoken, because it's true. And but that goes back. You can tie that in with removing the stigma of ultimately. You have to make a decision. What is more important? Your quote unquote imaginary reputation or your mental health and the way that you interact with your family and the people around you?
Yeah.
What is most important to you? The fact that you're going to get through your career, retire, and have a happy life?
Right.
Or are you going to commit suicide? Or are you going to be a miserable jerk and go through 2, 3, 4 divorces because you won't go to a therapist and fix what probably can be fixed?
Yeah. You've got to stop worrying about what other people think about you and just do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. If this were a physical problem, if you had cancer, most of us would not hesitate to go to the doctor for that.
Yeah.
But mental health stuff, boy, we just kick the can down the road and pretend like
Yeah.
it's not there, and we're worried what people think about us. Man, get over it.
Yeah.
We would rather you be alive than the alternative. So please, get some help, and everyone else needs to try to learn how to be supportive and get with it. Like I said, I admit that we don't know if it's a sprained ankle or an amputation.
Yeah.
But let's assume it's not an amputation yet. Let's assume that you will work your way back into the job or into an adjacent role within the field. Let's assume that you'll get that help, and we're not going to judge you or tear you down just because you raised your hand and said, "Yes, I need some help."
Yeah.
So let's
and
try anyway.
In these cultures, I mean, we give all this lip service to this is a family, this is a calling, this is that. Well, would you tell your brother, kick rocks, because he's having a little issue? No, you try to help him out. And that's what we need to stop giving lip service to it and actually doing what we're...
Yeah, if you're going to talk the talk.
Yeah, walk the walk.
Yeah.
That's going to be my final thought.
That's your final, that's your final thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk. Or shut the fuck up.
Come at me, bro. Oh, well, Jared, thanks for coming, man. I appreciate it. This has been
Absolutely
awesome. So,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll do it again. You can try and recruit us again.
yeah.
We'll give you another shot.
This time, bring actual paperwork.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Chaplains are an underappreciated part of the first responder mental health wellness scheme because they've had too many self-inflicted wounds. You've had too many chaplains who didn't pay attention to their officers. They didn't engage. They never showed up. And when they did show up, they just chummed around with the chief or the other commanders. Maybe it's because it was people their age or whatever, but they just failed to engage the new generation of cops that is constantly rolling in the door. And for lack of paying attention to the people who needed help, they isolated themselves, they marginalized themselves, and they became irrelevant. And so there are places that have chaplains on the books, and if you call them up, you got this 80-year-old guy that you've not seen in 30 years. And that's a crying shame, because we need more chaplains who can get out there and, just like, Christian chaplains have been doing for over 1,000 years, they're willing to be on the battlefield with the bullets flying, suffering the same kinds of sufferings, and providing a type of help that the counselor back in their offices can't do. And it's a great, addition to the counselors and the other helpers. But the chaplains need to be there. There needs to be a chaplain who's actually, worn the fire gear and been in the police car, and they understand in a very visceral way. They know the smells, they know the stresses, they've experienced it, and that is what a chaplain does. That makes him a very unique helper, and we need more of them desperately.
I don't know what I can.
Nope.
Yeah.
That
Nope.
wins.
That wins.
Talk. If you're gonna talk the talk, walk the walk, or shut the fuck up.
What those two guys said.
That's what he said.
And almost those exact words.
I just paraphrased.
Yeah, you're the translator.
Yeah, I translated that one for our audience.
Call you Luther from now on.
See, now my cops can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, everybody, like we end every episode, look, if you are struggling, there are resources out there. Reach out. If you know somebody that is struggling, let them know what resources are out there. Reach out to them. Let them know you care. Yeah. Thanks for stopping by, and take care of yourself.